most advanced and lethal fighting machine humans can build. The submarine spruikers say we'll also obtain something you can't put a price on.
For decades, the ocean floor has concealed the Soviet Union's darkest secrets. Dozens of nuclear submarine wrecks lie scattered across the seabed, silent steel tombs filled with deadly radiation. Everyone assumed these wrecks were just rusting away harmlessly in the deep. But when salvage divers finally descended to investigate these underwater graves, what they recorded changed everything. The footage they captured, the measurements they took, reveal that these aren't just relics of the Cold War, they're active threats. And what the divers discovered proves that the catastrophe we've been dreading may have already begun. The dive that changed everything. Our story begins in the frigid waters of the Norwegian Sea. The target, the K-278 Komsomolets, once the crown jewel of the Soviet Northern Fleet. This wasn't just another submarine. It was a one-of-a-kind marvel of Soviet engineering, built entirely from titanium with the ability to dive deeper than any American sub, plunging over 3,300 feet below the surface. It was the only one of its class ever built, a prototype, a ghost ship of the deep. On April 7, 1989, disaster struck. A fire erupted in the rear compartments while the sub was on a record-setting deep dive mission. The official story claims an electrical short sparked the blaze. But not everyone believes that version of events. Some experts whisper about experimental weapons testing gone wrong. Others suggest something even more sinister, that the Komsomolets was shadowed by a Western Hunter submarine, and that a collision in the darkness triggered the fatal fire. Whatever caused it, the result was catastrophic. For 6 brutal hours, the crew fought the flames in freezing conditions, as their systems failed one by one. The submarine surfaced briefly, but the fire was too intense. Before rescue could arrive, the Komsomolet slipped beneath the waves and plunged nearly 5,500 feet to the ocean floor. Of the 69 men aboard, only 27 survived. For 30 years, the wreck sat undisturbed, a memorial to fallen sailors, a Cold War tragedy. But here's what makes this wreck different. The Komsomolets wasn't just carrying sailors. Deep inside its titanium hull sits a 190-megawatt nuclear reactor. And that's not even the worst part. The submarine is also armed with 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes, each containing approximately 28 pounds of plutonium, one of the most toxic substances known to humanity. A single microscopic particle, if inhaled, can be lethal. For years, scientists insisted the wreck was stable. The water was too deep, too cold. The plutonium would stay contained. The Norwegians, whose fishing waters surrounded the wreck site, weren't so sure. So, in 2019, a joint Norwegian-Russian expedition did something unprecedented. They sent a state-of-the-art remotely operated vehicle down to record what was really happening on the seafloor. The footage that shocked the world. The salvage divers controlling the ROV thousands of feet above watched there, monitors in disbelief as the robot approached the wreck. The first images were haunting. The supposedly rust-proof titanium hull was covered in corrosion and decay. But when the ROV maneuvered toward a ventilation pipe on the submarine's exterior, the divers recorded something that made their blood run cold. A strange, cloudy plume was puffing from the pipe like smoke from a chimney. The robot's sensors immediately spiked. The divers weren't just seeing something unusual, they were measuring it in real time. They collected water samples from the plume, and when those samples reached the laboratory, the results were staggering. The radiation levels inside that plume measured up to 800,000 times higher than normal seawater. Some readings went even higher, hitting 1 million times normal background levels. Let that sink in. Not double the normal amount, not 100 times, 1 million times. The primary culprit was cesium-137, the same radioactive element that poisoned the landscape around Chernobyl. This substance enters the water, gets absorbed by plankton, which are eaten by small fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which eventually end up on dinner plates across Europe. What the salvage divers recorded proves something scientists had feared but couldn't confirm. The wreck is not stable. The plutonium in those torpedoes is breaking down. The salt water is eating through the submarine's hull, and the poison is escaping. The radiation plumes. The divers documented were pulsing with ocean currents, spreading contamination across one of the world's most productive fishing grounds. The Arctic Nuclear Graveyard. The Komsomolets recording was a wake-up call that forced scientists to reconsider every other piece of Soviet nuclear debris littering the Arctic seafloor. And what salvage divers have documented across the region is even more disturbing than anyone imagined. Welcome to the Barents and Kara Seas, the frigid backyard of Russia's Northern Fleet. During the Cold War, the Soviets treated these waters like a nuclear dumping ground. According to official reports, they intentionally scuttled 19 ships loaded with radioactive waste, dumped 17,000 containers of nuclear material, and disposed of 16 nuclear reactors, many still containing spent fuel. They simply dropped them into the ocean and sailed away. The most notorious of these isn't a complete submarine, but the reactor from the K-27. This experimental sub featured a liquid metal-cooled reactor that was a complete failure. After a terrible accident in 1968 sickened the crew, the Soviets spent 10 years trying to fix it before giving up. In 1982, they towed the entire submarine to a spot in the Kara Sea that was only 100 feet deep and deliberately sank it with 800 pounds of highly enriched uranium still inside. Why would they do this? The official story claims it was too expensive and dangerous to dismantle. But the darker theory suggests the reactor was so unstable that any attempt to take it apart on land risked triggering a catastrophic explosion. Sinking it was the only way to bury their mistake. If the Komsomolets is leaking in deep water, what's happening to the K-27 in shallow water where storms can reach it? Salvage divers who've surveyed the site report severe corrosion. And scientists fear the reactor could restart underwater, triggering a massive release of radiation and superheated steam. It would be an underwater Chernobyl, the modern disaster. Fast forward to 2003. The Cold War is over, and Russia is attempting to clean up its nuclear legacy with international assistance. Among the submarines slated for dismantling is the K-159, retired for 14 years and rusting at a dock with 800 kilograms of spent nuclear fuel still aboard. The plan was to tow this decrepit hulk to a shipyard for proper decommissioning. But in a decision that still baffles experts, they chose to tow the leaky submarine across the Barents Sea during a storm using barely functional pontoons. It was a disaster waiting to happen. When the storm hit, the pontoons broke loose. The K-159 began taking on water. In the middle of the night, the submarine with its 10-man crew and nearly a ton of nuclear fuel sank in over 800 feet of water. 9 men perished. This appears to be a story of criminal negligence. But some theorists suggest something more sinister, that the sinking was an intentional accident. Perhaps the submarine was so contaminated that no shipbreaker would touch it. Perhaps the cost of proper dismantling exceeded the international cleanup funds. The theory claims the accident was a convenient way to make a billion-dollar problem disappear into the depths. Salvage divers who've surveyed the wreck report that it's deteriorating rapidly, and there are no current plans to recover it. Another ticking time bomb sits on the ocean floor. The Pacific Ghost Fleet. If the Arctic is home to a few extremely dangerous wrecks, the Pacific hosts an entire fleet of them. Near Vladivostok, Russia's main Pacific port, lies what locals call the Submarine Cemetery. This isn't a couple of wrecks. This is a massive mothball fleet where the Soviet Union sent dozens, perhaps over 100 nuclear submarines to await scrapping. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the money for proper decommissioning vanished. For over 30 years, this ghost fleet has been rusting in shallow bays, tied to crumbling piers or half sunk in the mud. Salvage divers and aerial surveillance have recorded a truly post-apocalyptic scene. Rusted hulls, conning towers jutting from the water at bizarre angles, decks overgrown with vegetation. What most people don't realize is that many of these submarines weren't properly decommissioned. They still contain their nuclear reactors, and some may still hold spent fuel rods. They're corroding in salt water right next to a city of over 600,000 people. The recordings from this area aren't just documenting an environmental hazard. Some experts worry these unguarded nuclear wrecks could be scavenged by rogue states or terrorist organizations, using them as a parts supply or training ground for nuclear technology theft. This exact area has history. In 1985, at Chazma Bay near Vladivostok, a routine refueling operation went catastrophically wrong. A nuclear submarine's reactor went critical, causing a massive thermal explosion that killed 10 sailors instantly and spread radioactive contamination across the shipyard and surrounding area. The Soviets kept it secret for years. It was a small Chernobyl that most of the world never heard about. Now, the submarine cemetery sits directly atop this known contamination zone, and salvage divers report that many of these wrecks are in critical condition. Every year, the salt water eats deeper into their hulls. Every year, the risk of a reactor compartment collapse increases. What it all means. The recordings salvage divers have brought back from these wrecks, the radiation measurements, the video documentation, all point to one urgent conclusion. The ocean is not a safe disposal site for nuclear material. You cannot simply dump your most dangerous mistakes into the deep and forget about them. The real shock from the Komsomolets isn't just the radiation level, it's what it means for the food chain. That cesium-137 mimics potassium, which means every living creature from plankton to whales absorbs it. Norwegian scientists monitoring the local fish populations have already detected cesium-137 in commercial species. The levels are currently low enough to be considered safe, but the wreck is corroding. The leaks are getting worse, not better. And that plutonium? It has a half-life of 24,000 years. It's not going away in our lifetime, or our children's lifetime, or their children's lifetime. The recordings salvage divers captured in 2019 prove we're at the beginning of this crisis, not the end. Scientists are now in a desperate race against time to figure out what can be done. The plans being considered sound like science fiction. Lifting the K-159 from the depths in a billion-dollar operation, or building a custom sarcophagus like Chernobyl's, and lowering it a mile down to entomb the Komsomolets forever. These 3 Arctic wrecks alone contain more long-lived radioactivity than all the radioactive waste ever dumped in the ocean by every other country combined. The recordings salvage divers have made prove these aren't just tragic historical footnotes. They're active environmental disasters that are getting worse with each passing year. The underwater footage changes everything because it proves what scientists feared. Out of sight does not mean out of mind. These steel tombs aren't keeping their secrets. They're leaking them into our oceans, into our food chain, into our future. And the divers who documented this truth have given us an urgent warning we can no longer ignore.